Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for the P6-QA tool webinar. Just before we get started here, just a bit of housekeeping. Your mics are on mute, as Shannon already messaged you, but just in case anybody missed that, they're on mute during the presentation. However, please feel free to type questions in the chat, and the chat is, of course, located on the left side of your screen. So on that note, let's have a look at the P6-QA tool. First of all, to introduce myself, I am Marilyn Backstrom, one of the implementation folks at Emerald Associates. I've been working with project controls for some time now and had the honor to be able to work in project controls in a number of different businesses. With me is my colleague, Sue Hopkins. Sue is also an implementation specialist here at Emerald. She brings a wealth of project and cost and business administration experience from across a number of different industries. So when we talk about the P6-QA tool, now this tool was put together to address some issues. So when we look at schedules, when you're running many projects and very large projects, it's not easy to be sure you have good schedules. And if you don't have a good schedule for whatever the reason, that's a very high dollar question. There's another side to that as well. Exactly what is quality? What is a good schedule? Well, when we talk about quality on a schedule, that depends on so many things. You've got standards, attitudes, experience and skills, collaboration, which involves trust as well, and time on tools. So when you're talking about what is quality, this is part of the reason that we have so many certifications that are available. You've got ACE, you've got PMI. It's not easy to define, and it varies with your experience. So when I'm talking about quality, in other words, the quality of a P6 schedule, schedule quality is something that you monitor. You're monitoring all the different facets of the schedule: timing, resourcing, costs, and the actual schedule structure itself. So on that note, I have a poll that I'd like to send out, because I'd like to just get an idea here of how often do you currently check your schedule quality. So I've sent that particular poll question out. Feel free to answer as you wish. Just trying to get a feel for it, because we've had folks that we have spoken to about schedule quality. Some monitor the schedule quality at the beginning and never touch it again. Some monitor it after updates, and that looks like what most people are saying here. And it just depends what kind of a scenario that you're in. But the thing is, if you want to deal with schedules and have the best outcome, you're looking for reliable and consistent schedules. A good schedule is a schedule that you can use to plan and predict. You're dealing, of course, with time, resources, costs. You need what you're looking at to be reliable, to be consistent. When you go to look for a task, it needs to be there. You need to be able to review bottlenecks. You need to be able to see where a bottleneck may occur, where there might be a problem with deliveries, problem with a crew, problem with productivity in some facet or another of your schedule. You need to be able to see all of those. You've got another piece that you need to take into consideration as well, because you've got business process adherence. You need to be able to model your own corporate business processes. AFE approvals, sign-offs, conventions and standards for naming and codes, things like that. Now, many companies rely on third-party consultants or senior staff to be the quality checker for the schedules. Well, if you're bringing in a third-party consultant, it can get very expensive. And also, if you're relying on senior team members to be your schedule quality checkers, you can easily run into bottlenecks because these senior team members have other things they need to look after as well. So the P6-QA changes the paradigm altogether. So before we have a look at how it works, I have a couple more poll questions. So the next poll is, how do you check schedule quality currently? Is it something you go through manually? Outside contractor, it looks like most people are saying schedule quality check tool other than P6-QA. And that's awesome. The important thing is you need to keep monitoring your schedule quality, of course. So for schedule quality, when you're looking at the P6-QA tool specifically, it has multiple parts. So we've got client-specific validations, DCMA validations, business process validations, schedule quality validations, project calendar validations, and statistic validations. So the schedule quality check is monitoring a number of different pieces. So you may be using a tool that checks part of those, but you may not have access to all of them, depending on exactly how you're doing your schedules. Now, when I'm looking at schedule quality, the P6-QA tool is looking for things like what constraints are in the schedule, resources, updating, what process are you using, and once you get the updates done, what does your schedule quality look like at that point? Because of course, as soon as you do an update, you can have things change very easily. So when we talk about industry standards, we spoke about different schedule quality checks. The P6-QA tool checks all of these checks and more. So on the screen, you can see there's DCMA checks, GAO checks, ACE checks, PMI checks. Well, the P6-QA tool has them all covered and more on top of that as well. Now, for our business process, you can, of course, in the P6-QA tool, you can check things like project scheduling, data date versus the scheduled dates. AFEs, maybe you don't have a way right now of monitoring the approvals. You can in the business process. AFEs obviously must be approved before the work starts. You need to monitor that. Naming and activity IDs. Now, there is a lot of places where you need specific naming conventions in the activity IDs and the naming. Well, you can set that up in business processes in P6-QA, and it will monitor that. So if something gets added to the schedule that doesn't adhere to those business processes, it's going to be very obvious. Another one is mandatory codes and UDFs. If you are running your reporting that demands mandatory codes be present so that all the information can be included and included correctly on your reports, you want to make sure that those mandatory codes don't get missed somewhere. Again, the business processes in P6-QA will do that for you. Resources and expenses, primary roles, cost accounts, all those sorts of things. Whatever your requirements are, you set them up in the business process and monitor them. Now, in the corporate standards, P6-QA tool can help to address corporate standards by project type. So you could have any of these project types that you've seen on your screen. You can, of course, monitor corporate standards right from proposal to approval and through execution to completion. Now, in the P6-QA tool, there is some new recently added checks. You can now check logic detail, you can check calendars, and you can run statistic checks. So on that note, I'll pass it back to Sue, and she'll take you into the tool itself, and you can have a bird's eye view of how the P6-QA tool works.
Okay, thank you, Mary Lynn. I'm just going to share my screen here, and we're going to go live into the tool and see what it looks like. Is everyone able to see my my screen at this point? You should be looking at P6. Okay,
Yep,
I'm going to
it's
take
good,
that
Mary.
as a
It's good
yes.
too.
Perfect. Okay, so you're looking at a P6 client application that's up here in front of me that has the P6-QA tool running in it. The great thing about P6-QA is it runs right in P6 itself. And it doesn't matter whether you are using the client version or whether you're working in web. You can set up layouts to tailor what you're checking on each one of these P6-QA checks. Um, So, the great thing about this is that no matter what your level of experience is, whether that's as being a scheduler or if you're maybe new to a company, anyone in this P6 can run this tool and just find out kind of how their schedules are measuring up and how they are adhering to these process checks and these quality checks that are laid out here with P6-QA. Now, I'm going to kind of go over an example. I am currently working on a project and I'm building this project out. So, as I'm going, and it's the one that's highlighted here, you can see with the blue. As I'm building it out, I am going to run P6-QA as I go so that I can kind of self monitor um, how my schedule is actually measuring up. Are there things that I need to address that I maybe haven't actually seen or noticed yet? So you can see that I have a field where it says I have my last run date. So that's the last time that I ran the QA tool on this particular project. The way that I turn on the P6-QA tool to run against a project is I actually have this column here that is a yes no column. So, very simple. Yes means it's running, it's going to pick it up and run it. And no means it's not going to. Now you can see I've got some that have some blanks in there. Well, my default in the tool is blank equals it's not going to run. So in order to run it, I essentially have to say yes here in this column. Now below, you can see on some of these other projects here that I have a frequency defined on this 4P6QA. And what this determines is how often I want to regularly run the QA tool on this particular project. Now, you can say I've got weekly, monthly, daily. I can set that to what I want, and it's automatically going to, and of course, we have to have this TS here, and it's going to automatically pick this project up on a weekly, monthly, daily basis and run QA against it. So if you have active work going on in your project and you want to do this regularly, you can set that up. Now, if it's blank, it means that it's only going to run when you tell it to run. And I like to call that running it on the fly. And I'm going to show you a little bit later how we can do running on the fly, so to speak. So you can see easily, I have the schedule quality validations up on my screen. So I'm displaying these as a layout so that I can easily look across and see where I'm measuring up and where I'm not measuring up on this schedule. I also have the ability to go into a notebook that corresponds with the type of quality check that I'm doing. So, since I have schedule quality on this displayed right now, I'm actually going to look at the schedule quality validation notebook. And P6-QA goes out and creates these notebooks and updates them as you run QA every time. So, this is always the most current data. I'm just going to pop this notebook open so that you can kind of see more of what this little report and this notebook looks like. At the top, we have a general summary of all the schedule quality checks that are being run for this project here. As I scroll down, and one thing I want to point out is that I can easily see, even in this table here, what's complying and what is not complying in my project. As I scroll down, I'm going to get a little bit more detailed information about each one of my checks. It's going to, in this case, this is the open ends check. And I'm going to kind of concentrate on open ends just so that we have a common thread going on here. But it's going to say, it's telling me it's for all activities that are missing predecessors and successors. It's going to give me a little bit more of a breakdown of when it's red, if I have information in there on when it would be yellow, if I have a yellow show up. And then it's also going to tell me the UDFs that are actually involved with this particular check. And we'll take a look at those. One of the UDFs is going to be that indicator, and that's what I have shown on my layout that we were looking at prior. Then we have some summarization data down here in this first table. And then the second table is actually identifying which activities are not adhering to this check properly. So in this case, since it is open ends, I can see that I've got, some that have predecessors missing. I have some that have successors missing. And it's also giving me that activity ID where I have my problem, the actual activities where the problem is occurring. And that goes down for each one of these checks. Now I'm going to go ahead and close this down. This is really great, and I love to see that I can see that summary information very easily. However, I'm working on my project and I want to see actually in my activities where each one of these is sort of measuring up on the activity itself. And I'm sorry, I have two projects open. Let me just get one open here, and that might help make this a little bit better here. So, on each activity, you're going to have an individual indicator. And again, these are UDFs that have been set by P6-QA to say, okay, which ones are compliant, which ones are not. And it's easy to see which ones they are. Now, I'm going to just concentrate on logic missing right now. So want to look at all the logic missing, and I only want the ones that are failing. I don't want the ones that are okay. So I've created a filter to only show me the ones that are not compliant. So when I shrink that down, wow, it looks a little better than all of those other those all those lines and lines of activities. So now I can see, okay, I've got four activities that are not compliant, but I can see that of course I have a finish milestone here. And we know that if it's the finished milestone for our project, it's not going to have any successors. I know that, and I want to let P6-QA know that I am aware that this thing is here, but really it's actually an exception to the rule, so to speak. So I can go in and pop this open, and I can put a blue star on it, which tells P6-QA, hey, I've looked at this and it's okay. You don't have to worry about it. So I'm going to do that on both my finish and my start milestone. Well, I've got two others that have, an issue with them here. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to actually fix the successor. Actually, I want to fix the predecessor on this 110 activity here. And I'm going to add that and correct that particular um, problem with that uh, predecessor here. So I've added the predecessor, and I'm going to go, okay, I want to check this again. I want to rerun my validation, and I want to see, how I'm doing now on my validation. So I can go back to my project, and this is where I would run it on the fly. The way that I run it immediately, and that doesn't matter whether I have a frequency set in here or I don't. No matter any time when I click in here and I delete out that date, that indicates to P6-QA that it needs to pick up this project and it needs to do another schedule analysis on it, another quality analysis. So while it's doing that, it'll just take a minute or so. I actually want to visit some of the business processes that we have available with P6-QA here. Now I'm going to just open up a new layout here. And we can see that I have some business processes that I have set up. And it's telling me how I'm doing with those. I can see I have an activity ID format that I have defined, and I have some that aren't working very well with that. So I probably need to take a look at those. Doesn't look like I have any duplicate names. I also have an activity type, which this is fairly new in our last release, is that we can check the activity types. So this is a construction type of schedule, and the majority of my activity types should be fixed duration and units. So I'm checking for that. I can also find out if I have mandatory codes that are assigned. I can also look at my roles, see if I have a primary resource, cost accounts, expense categories. I can even check, let me just move this over, for steps. And as well, I have down here a business process validation notebook. So I also have that summary information as well as my little bit more focused information on each one of the checks. Now, let's actually go and let me see if this is done running. It should be done because this is a fairly small project and the checks are going to go pretty quickly on this. Okay, so I can tell that it is done running because I now have a new date in my last run date. And it tells me the date and the time that I ran it last. So I want to go back and I'm going to look at my schedule quality notebook again so I don't have to switch my layouts. And let's just take a look at my open ends and how they've changed. Now, before I had 4 actual activities that were not compliant. They had open ends. Well, remember, I starred 2 of them, telling P6-QA that I've checked these and they're okay. But I still had 1 left that I did not fix that, the successor on. So it's telling me I have actually 3 that don't comply, but I only have 1 that I still need to take a look at. You can also see that now I have 2 different percentages here. One is for the actual amount, the percentage of the actual amount of activities compared to the total activities, the percentage. And what the percentage is of my remaining activities. The reason they're 2 different colors is because I have set a target, and that target is anything less than 5%, I want to flag green. So my 3.12 is green. Because my actual percentage is above 5%, it is saying it's red. So you have the ability to actually flag these and show how at what threshold and what level you want some different colors and some different notifications to come up for this particular check. Now you're probably saying, okay, I don't necessarily want 5% as my target as my threshold here. I don't want that. What do I do if I want to change that? Well, we have the ability, and that's also included in your notebook as you go into those pieces of information that are more defined on each check. And it's going to say, how do I set the criteria for those thresholds? So I can see on my missing logic here, I have 5% set. And that is and it's set as on my project. Now I can set different thresholds for each project if I want to. Maybe I have a different threshold for the type of project that it is. Maybe I have a different threshold for what phase I'm in on my threshold. I can actually go out here and I can set these to what I want them to be. So it's as simple as changing the value here. Now, when we install this for you, what we will do is we will go and we will go through each one of these percentages or thresholds with you and determine what your most common one would be. We'll set that as a default, that common one. We'll set it as a default, and you won't have to go in and set these for every single project as long as it is in line with the default that you want. If you want to change it, you can go out here and you can change it after if it's something different than the default. Now, some checks need a couple of pieces of information. Not only do they need the threshold on them, like this long lags here, but I also need to tell P6-QA what do I define as a long lag. So in this case, in this group of projects here under Bob Beagle, 8 hours is what I am considering a long lag. So anything that is over 8 hours on that lag, it's going to flag and tell me, hey, this one is longer than 8 hours, the lag on that particular activity. However, up on these two CAPEX projects here, I have defined that 40 hours is a long lag. So you can define what your tolerance is for your lags, your high floats, things like that. So in some cases, you have two pieces that you are going to define. Now, on our business processes, I just kind of want to show you how we would define an activity ID format. So you can see here that we have defined a pattern of what our activity ID should follow. And P6-QA is going to go out and it's going to compare what my activity ID is to this format that I have. And we can define this in as many different ways as you could possibly think of. And this is going to be the format that you mostly are going to want to check for. Sometimes you have a standard format for the majority of your activities, but you may want to, you may have milestones that don't follow that same format. That's what you're going to put here is the one that it's mostly going to follow. And then again, you can choose your percentage of tolerance on each one of those. Now, one thing I do want to also show you is the calendar report that we most recently added for a client. This was at a client's request. What they wanted to do is they wanted to check calendars within the calendar itself, that the calendar had the same start and finish time for each day. Then they also wanted to check that across calendars that we also had the start and finish as the same time. So they always had an 8 to 5 start and finish time on their calendars. So in this case, you can see that my 24-hour calendar, it's fine within the calendar itself. It's starting at midnight, it's ending or it's starting at 12:01, it's ending at midnight. However, across all those calendars, it's telling me down here at the bottom, you have at least one calendar that's out of whack here. So this was something that we did for a client, and specifically they asked us to do this, and we set up a notebook for it and actually did this check for them as part of our P6-QA in, in, installation for them. Now, we all know, we've got this project all spick and span and it looks good, and we've got greens all the way across, and we've had our project okayed by upper management, and we are ready to fly. Well, that doesn't mean we're done with our quality assessments here. As Marilyn said, we have we have to monitor these as progress is put on them, and each time we get some progress. So you can see here, I have a couple of uh, progress reports or progress schedules that I've received from a oh shoot, just from a construction company that is actually part of ours, a contractor. There we go, a contractor. So they've sent me a schedule, and my first one they've already sent me, and I'm just going to change my layout here. My first one they've sent me, and I've actually taken a look at it and ran the P6-QA tool on it. But I've gotten a second one in, and all I've done is import it. Well, I want to run my QA on this newly imported one. So I'm going to go and change this to yes and let that run. In the meantime, let's look at what my first my first progress schedule looks like. So I'm going to open this one up, and I can see, behind this loading data here, that it was fairly clean across, but I had some negative float that it was flagging for me. Um, and I want to take a look at which activities were contributing to that. So I'm going to go over into my activities. First, let me take my filter off. And then I'm going to apply the layout that actually is showing my updating um, criteria that I want to look at when I'm updating projects and when I'm getting those updates. So now I can see, okay, my this is a statistic, which is one of our new checks. Is my remaining duration greater than my original duration? And it's coming through, and it's telling me, how is it measuring up right here? It's comparing my original duration to my baseline original duration. Are my finish dates less than my data date? Do I have any late finish dates, which didn't pertain right now because we just had one that was completed and just a milestone. And then I have this flag that's telling me there's some negative float out there. Well, I might have wanted to send this back to my contractor and said, hey, we need to fix this. So you can find out fairly quickly when they send these to you where they're lacking and where they're not. So I probably would have sent this back and said, you need to fix this negative float. It's not okay. So let's go back, and I'm going to again refresh my data and see if my second progress schedule is done with its, there it is. Yep. So it is also now finished. And I'm going to go ahead and open this project. But I can see I've got a few more reds on here that I want to go look at to find out what activities and what's going on with my schedule. So in my activities, now I can see I've got a little bit more red here. I did have an actual duration that ended up being greater than my baseline original duration. So this activity actually went 31 days instead of 30 days, as it was actually put in as the original duration. It also finished late, which makes sense because it was a day late in or had actual duration a day greater. It's telling me that I have a budget that's over resource. Well, that makes sense too, right? Because they ended up working a day longer. So my budgeted cost is less than my actual cost. I ended up going over on these. Now, on my last one, it's telling me that I have no resource actuals on this particular one. Well, it started but for whatever reason, there's no actuals in there. So I might want to question that. I might want to, say, hey, what gives here. So this is going to be a very easy way, even if it's not a schedule that you get from outside your organization. Maybe you just are wanting to check this schedule after it's been updated through a certain date, and you have that cutoff date. Same thing. You may want to run these and then go out, take a look at what is compliant, what is not, and then maybe ask some questions and find out, why is this happening? What, is there a reason that you don't have any actuals on this particular one, even though it started, etc. So this is going to help you stay in line even as you go and move further through on your project and as it progresses. One last thing I would like to show you before I hand it back over to Mary Lynn is that we do have some other statistics. I showed you some with the remaining durations and original durations and those comparisons there, but we do have a couple of other items. So if you are a contractor and you do send out maybe a transmittal or something with your if you're sending your updated schedule to your owner, what you might want to do is you have a lot of times you need to fill out a transmittal. So we've made some nice little statistics here where you can have it counts the number of not started activities in progress. Again, here's our remaining duration and our greater than our original duration. How many have been completed? And we also have some other statistics that might help you also fill out those. And that would be, let me get to the right thing. Some other items. That you may need to fill out. How many start milestones? How many finish milestones? Level of effort. So we've tried to build some things in that are going to be helpful to you in more ways than just, this quality piece here. We're trying to bring out some statistics for you that you can analyze and that you can look at and actually get some good information off of. Now, the idea is there are a lot of schedule quality checks out here, whether it's the business process, whether it's the statistics, maybe it's the schedule qualities that Mary Lynn mentioned that we have covered DCMA. We have covered GAO. We even have NASA covered in here. We have taken as many organizations as we can without, totally redoing every single one, but all those checks have been built in here. But maybe they're not checks that are important to you specifically. Maybe there are certain things that you want to focus on. And the idea is that just like I set up layouts to show you what this tool does, you would want to set up layouts for your organization that display the things that you are most concerned with. And you can actually put those out there as global layouts. All of your schedulers would be able to use the same layouts. They can self monitor and they can keep track of their own items. So you don't have to use those expensive third parties and you don't tie up your senior schedulers in trying to keep ahead of the schedule quality in your organization. So, with that, I am going to turn back over to Mary Lynn and allow her to finish up for us. Let me just get it swapped over here.
Okay, I think I've got it back, Sue, but I don't have any slides.
Okay. Let me go back and see if I can fix that.
Sorry, I don't have any access to reset that.
That's okay. Share material. I guess I need to do that. Okay. Now I'm going to Take it
Awesome.
back
There we
to
go.
you. Okay, I got to put the session control back to you.
Yeah.
There you go.
Thank you, Sue. That was a very nice, very interesting tour through the P6-QA tool. So when we're talking about the P6-QA tool, you can be running a number of different scenarios, many, many, many different ones. But what you want to keep in mind is whether it's single or multiple projects, you can track what's going on with your schedule quality and, of course, report it. So there's some examples on the screen. You can monitor improvement over time. You can use snapshotting methodology for this. Now, Emerald has a tool for that. It's called EP-datawarehouse. And you can, of course, create whatever reports you need. Some of the ones on the screen here are examples, but it makes it a lot easier to say, okay, when we updated this schedule last time, what did our schedule quality look like? Now, when we've done another update, is it better? Because of course, continual improvement is what we're all looking for. So you want to monitor your improvement, use the snapshots, compare metrics and changes. Because if we're not improving things over time, we need to, of course, address what's going on. So a snapshotting example that we have here, you can create a snapshot of your projects. And what that includes, of course, is taking all the results from running P6-QA. So it goes over to Data Warehouse. And when the snapshots are created in Data Warehouse, they're copies of the information in P6 that are stored and managed externally. So what happens is, them being external, they're also stable and independent of any changes made in P6 after the snapshots are taken. So that makes the data suitable for generating management reports. So they're tagged with the period information, and snapshots for an arbitrary number of periods can be maintained inside EP-datawarehouse. That allows going back in time and generating reports and charts for previous periods. It also allows accurate reporting on how virtually any value in P6 changes over time. So you can monitor this update versus the next update, or you could take it back quite a ways for a project that's been in existence for a long time. So from that information, of course, you can put together some trending. And there's an example of a schedule quality trending report on the screen. So you can monitor, and in this case, they're monitoring, of course, on a project, and you can see all the different checks that are being monitored and where they were at a specific time period. You can do the same for business processes. Now, this is something that I know a number of companies struggle with, to make sure that their business processes, a simple one is one like I mentioned before. You have management reports, higher level reports over top of your projects that are running in the company that require global coding. They require specific codes to be populated correctly before you can generate a correct report. Well, of course, that's a pretty important business process. And you want to be sure that if you are having some sort of an issue on a schedule or a number of schedules, is it improving? Because you need it to improve. So how do you find out if it's improving? Of course, trending. So when we look at P6-QA, the benefits and return on investment, for your users, you're streamlining the learning. It allows your users to self-correct. So you may have somebody that is dealing with schedules, maybe updating part of a schedule, doing some particular task, and this can help them a lot because this scheduling may not be, as I always put it, their world. They may be just doing part of it, and it can point out to them right away if there's something else they need to focus on. So accomplishment, it raises standards, reduces reliance on consultants. Now for your schedules, offers unique high-level views and improves your project portfolios. It gives real-time adherence feedback and helps with your automation, because when you have this in place, for example, you can validate a lot of activities in a schedule, whereas if you need to go through them in copious detail manually, it's time consuming. So on that note, is there any questions we can address?
You can type your questions into either the chat or the questions area on the left-hand side, and we will answer what we can, or we will answer your questions, I guess. Okay, so we have a question about EP-datawarehouse. Is it cloud-based, and how is the security maintained? So what this is this is just it's a database, and it can be deployed either on premise or it can be in a cloud. So we can accommodate any form of that. So if you wanted to keep it in a cloud and you had it on-prem type of situation, what you could do is we would make that connection there so that you could go out to the cloud, you could pull that data from that snapshot or snapshots into whatever reporting tool you're using. Um, or if it is on-prem, we would deploy it on-prem and it would just be located on-site for you. Any other questions? Okay. We'll just give just a couple of minutes more for questions. But as we go, let's go ahead and kind of wrap things up a bit. And like I said, if you find something, that comes up as we're doing this, let's go ahead and ask the question here. Let's see, we have one more. Okay, so it says, will a tool perform a comparative analysis of contractor schedules, identify changes to logic or activities? No, it does not identify those changes unless you are looking at, remember how I had the first progress and the second progress? That would be, you would be comparing between those two. So what you could do is open up both schedules that have had the tool run on them, and you could see how they measured up. That would be the only comparison in that respect there. So there's not like an active comparison there. Okay, go ahead, Mary Lynn.
Okay, well, if you are interested in taking a closer look at P6-QA, we are more than happy to help. So Emerald can help you with this. With over 20 years of experience working with Primavera tools, from the early days of P3 Expedition and Monte Carlo to today's P6 Unifier, Risk, Crystal Ball, etc., Emerald knows the tools and how to apply them effectively for short and long-term success. So with worldwide experience in many industries and project types, our mission is to drive project success through innovation. Our commitment to Oracle Primavera clients is our unmatched investment in our solutions and our add-ons and integrations toolkit that drive real user adoption and productivity. Emerald is headquartered in Calgary, Alberta. We're expanding around the world to serve the international client base with new offices in California and Australia. So we are a full service partner, one stop. If it's tools you need, we can help you. Services, we can help you, and training, we've got that covered as well. So on the screen now is contact information. So if you would like further information or a specific question comes up, please feel free to contact us. We're more than happy to help. And thank you so much for joining us.